This is episode number 88, featuring Salmagundi Club's Tim Newton.
This is the PleinAir podcast with Eric Rhodes, publisher and founder of PleinAir magazine. In the PleinAir podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called PleinAir, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plain air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhodes.
Thank you, Jim Kipping. This podcast is brought to you by the second annual Figurative Art Convention and Expo. One of the great ways for any artist to perfect their skills is to learn figurative painting or portrait painting, even as a landscape painter, for instance. Instructors include David John Casson, Michelle Dunaway, Casey Baugh, Daniel Sprick, Sadie Valeri, the legendary Bert Silverman, and there's so many more, too many to mention here. Held in Miami this coming November. You can learn more at figurativeartconvention.com. The interview is also underwritten by Streamline Premium Art Video. We created this because we wanted to create the highest level videos available in the market to really get into the mind and the brushstrokes of the artist. You can check out the amazing lineup of premium painters at streamlineartvideo.com. And coming up after the interview, I'll be answering art marketing questions in the Art Marketing Minute. But first, let's get right to our interview with Tim Newton from the Salmagundi Club. Well, Tim, welcome to the PleinAir podcast. Are you in New York today?
I am. I'm actually at the Salmagundi Club this afternoon.
Well, you know, the Salmagundi Club had a lot to do with you and me meeting. Maybe you can tell the folks how you and I originally connected.
Absolutely. Here's the first question. What year did you begin PleinAir magazine?
Oh, you're going to ask me a question like that? I can't possibly. My wife, I can't even tell you where my keys are. But it's been it's been quite some time ago. It's been a long time ago.
I'm going to say 2004 or 5. It may have been because I reached out to you because I was very impressed with your magazine, and it was within your first year of publication, and I got a hold of you, and you said, well, I'm going to be in New York. And I said, well, I'd like to meet you, and I'd like to buy you dinner at the Salmagundi Club. And so we sat downstairs in the dining room. I remember the table we sat at, and I, congratulated you on a great publication. And we had we began our first brainstorming right there, Eric.
It's really true. I remember that moment very clearly, and what I remember saying to you, and I hope you won't take any offense to this, and I certainly hope members of Salmagundi won't take any offense to it, but I walked into this beautiful old building. What is it, Fifth Avenue or something?
Yeah, we're on Fifth Avenue, right south of Union Square.
So I walked into this beautiful historic building. I walked around. I got to see, the old library, and I see the pallets from all these people, famous people who are now deceased. And we go downstairs and have dinner, and everybody that's having dinner is over 130. And except for you and me, and we're probably both about the same age. You're probably 10 years younger than me. But the comment I made to you at the time was, if this club's going to survive, you probably ought to get some younger people in there. Do you remember that?
I do. And they weren't that old, and I'm older than you are, Eric, so thanks for your comment. But, every organization goes through, a series of times where they are in their strength and weakness, and so the club has been around since 1871 and has had absolutely great pinnacles of success and moments in art history and quieter times. So, I came first to the club after meeting a fella in the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. We were both flying back to New York. We were both actually returning from the big art weekend in September that they have every September in Jackson Hole. And he introduced himself as a member of Salmagundi, and he invited us to join him in October of 2002, and I walked in and fell in love, applied for membership that very evening. It was just love at first sight, and was here at the club for 2 or 3 years, and realized that the shows that I was going to in the West and whatnot were differently curated than the shows and exhibits that were going on here. And, there've always been top artists at the club, and really some beautiful paintings and sculpture exhibited. But it wasn't quite what I was used to at shows like Prix de West and the Western Visions at the National Museum of Wildlife Art. So that was kind of my first exposure and awareness of where the club should be, could be, and had the potential to be. So,
well, and for the people who are listening, why the heck are you talking to somebody that has to do with an art club? I'm going to get to that, but one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is not only about the club, which is a fascinating history, but also because you're a collector and you're also a plein air collector, an enthusiast of plein air paintings.
Absolutely.
And I think that it's nice that people get that perspective. But one of the things that I think is remarkable, and I want to give you some kudos, from that moment in time when you and I met, I think you were a member. I don't know if you had a board seat or anything at the time.
No, I was just a member, art lover member.
But I remember you telling me after my comment about, this place is going to age out if you don't do something about it. I remember you telling me that you had these big plans. And of course, we didn't know each other. And I thought, well, this guy talks a great game. Let's see what happens. And then, over time, you ended up getting board seats, and then you ended up as the chairman of the Salmagundi Club.
Well, yes. I've been chairman for 4 terms. I'm in my just now beginning my 8th year as chairman.
Wow.
But at the time you and I met, I was nobody. I was an art lover, art collector, and I proposed to the leadership at the time. It was Richard Pionk was president, Pam Singleton was chairman, and Claudia Seymour was vice president. I met with them out of my frustration about what I wasn't seeing. I thought, well, here's an idea, and I'll just take a minute to do a synopsis. But I had become friends with some of the great painters, typically people from the West. So it was Clyde Aspavig, Matt Smith, Ralph Oberg, Skip Whitcomb, David LaFell, Sherry McGraw, Bill H.F. And so basically I went to those folks and I said, I've got an idea for a way to have the artwork that you do shown in New York City, which, their artwork was essentially not being seen here, them and many other great artists. And so I said, if I go to the club and say, I'd like to bring these artist friends to the club and have an exhibition, will you come and do it? And everyone said, oh, yes. Clyde was all in, Josh Elliott. It was a great group of people that I had basically prearranged to introduce to the club and vice versa, and sat with then Richard, Pam, and Claudia and proposed this idea to have a show that would be kind of like Prix de West or the Coors Show or Masters of the American West at the Autry or Western Visions in Jackson. And they, and really Claudia Seymour, who was vice president at the time and soon to become president, she was very supportive and said, yes, these are artists that should be shown here in New York. And in the end, they gave me 11 days in May in 2008 to have what is now, was then American Masters, and we're having our 10th anniversary show of American Masters this coming October. Friday, October 12th will be the gala. And so we had 11 days in May, and all of these artists that had been maybe aware of the club, but I brought them to the club. We had a grand gala. We sold $412,000 in art. It was like nothing that had been seen at the club probably ever, and certainly not for many, many decades going backwards. So it was pretty grand. We were very fortunate, I'll say, to have that be in May of '08 because the bottom fell out of the economy in the fall of '08, and we could have never managed to have that show with the success it had. And as a result, it gave great awareness nationally to the Salmagundi Club, which had not done a lot of national shows. We've always had our own member shows, but those at the time were not at the same level as American Masters. Subsequent to that, many of the American Masters artists became members at Salmagundi, and the quality of the art began to rise dramatically because we had people such as those that were in the shows. John Stobart was in the show. John Stobart is now a member. I mean, our roster membership from that time in 2008, which was just under 500 members, has grown to over 1,000 members in the 10 years since the beginning. And I have to say, Claudia Seymour became president almost exactly at that time. And she was completely supportive, and on her own was so encouraging to so many artists to reach out to them and to say, hey, here's a reminder, our member show is coming up, these events are coming up, please participate. And so I was, at that time, I became a vice president, but really, whether I've been vice president or chairman, my single greatest pleasure and success has been bringing American Masters into existence and having that as a benefit and fundraiser for the club.
Well, I think that there are a couple of things that I wanted to point out based on what you've said. First off, for everybody listening to this, if you have a gut feel on something, speak up and say something, because you're a guy who was one of 500 members, a lot of people out there who probably had some similar thoughts but never did anything about it, and you really motivated that, and you not only did you motivate it, but you stepped up, you brought people in, you did some work on behalf of the club to pull in these artists, and I think that these are how things change. You took what was a wonderful, historic but sleepy club and turned it into a very important, dynamic institution, which now, to be a part of that American Masters show or many of the other shows has been remarkable. The other thing that you did, which you probably don't want to talk about too much, but I had, at the early stages, I had gone to Salmagundi and I'd seen some of the shows that were taking place in there. And one of the things you did is you said, you know what, if we're going to have have a show with the Salmagundi name on it, we got to make sure that the art that's inside the Salmagundi Club is vetted properly. And I know you got a lot of resistance on that because everybody wants to be in the shows, but you've really made a point to make sure that quality is there. And it's not about leaving people out, but it's about making sure that you're sending the right message. Can you address that briefly?
Well, I'm going to clarify this a little bit, and that is to say, I can't take the credit for that in that same fashion, because what I can take credit for is bringing American Masters, and then that raised the bar just within itself. I actually had club members that say that encouraged them to do a better job painting. When you hang with mediocrity in a show, then it's really comfortable to just coast along and be mediocre. But when you see what can be, when you look at the works of Don Demers or Jacob Collins or Chris Blossom or Joe McGurl, then you say, wow, I'd like to step up to that level. The artwork that's in the club got better as a ripple effect from American Masters, but really in those early days of American Masters and my vice presidency and then chairmanship, it's the job of the president of the club. So there's two offices of the club that are so I'm the chairman of the board and chief executive officer. I'm in charge of everything in general. Really, the buck stops here as CEO. But then we also have the office of president, and the president oversees the art activities at the club in general. And so that's why when I wanted to do American Masters, I went to Dick Pionk and then the others at the time. When Claudia Seymour became president, Dick had passed away while Claudia was vice president, and so Claudia and I really walked hand in hand, because once we did American Masters, then she really called for artists to toe the line and improve their work and to do their best. And then as people saw a national show of great prestige at the club, then they said, well, I'd like to be in that show. Maybe I'd like to be at the club. And so better artists started submitting their applications. So it's certainly not all me. That is, I would never want that to be said. I'm very proud of the influence that American Masters brought to the club, and the friendships that I have with artists across America, which are, my greatest treasure. That has led to many of those people wanting to join the club.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you hear resistance to out there in the community is this idea of vetting. People will oftentimes say, well, I deserve to be in a show, or I want to be in a show. Why is this concept of vetting important? Can you just touch base on that for a minute?
Absolutely. We hang our artwork here on Fifth Avenue, and this kind of circles back to one of your earlier comments, and that is, when I first came in, the artwork that was shown in general, there were some good artworks shown always, like my friend who I met in the airport, Del Bach, who might happen to see him across the room at the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. He's always been in the shows, and he's a terrific artist. But that being said, the majority of the works that I saw, the majority of the shows that I saw that were hanging here in 2003 and 4 and 5 did not reflect the days of the greatness of Selma Gundy when Ernest Blumenschein and Frank Tenney Johnson and Carl Rungus hung on the walls, Thomas Moran. And so I was going to quit the club because I thought this is, I was disappointed because of what it was. It was not what it was at one time. And like I said, that's okay because every organization goes through ups and downs.
Right.
But instead of quitting, I said, well, maybe I can be part of a solution to the problem. And that goes to your comment here about vetting, because we're on Fifth Avenue. We have one of the most historic and prestigious art addresses in the world, and we always need to up our game, even now, all the time, continually, because when people that live in Greenwich Village, and we're in Greenwich Village, and they come in to the club, if they are looking at mediocrity, if they're looking at silly art or things that are not at the highest level and standard, they're not going to come back, and then we lose our credibility as an organization, and so it's in our best interest for the health and the future of the club to have the highest bar of vetting, and that goes to both the exhibits that we hang on the wall today and to the membership applications that are submitted to us, so that when people come here, they see art that they want to buy, take home, live with. They see, even if it's art that's not for them, they may say, well, this is not for me, but wow, this is exceedingly well done. It's a skill-based beauty. So, it's exciting times here at the club because we've come a long way, and there's still plenty of room to go. But, I have to say I'm very, very excited about our American Masters this year. This is year number 10. We started it first in 2008. We took 1 year off when we remodeled the gallery. The intention of American Masters was twofold. It changed 1 week after it was approved because the first intention was to bring my friends to Salmagundi and introduce to the club what could be and the nature of these big shows that I model it after. And by the way, I had no original ideas. I stole every good idea that I've used at American Masters and borrowed, and it was, I had no idea what I was doing, and just took the plunge and took the risk. There was no budget, there was no money, and we just created it out of nothing. And so I got the approval 1 week to go ahead and do the show. They said, okay, 11 days in May. And 1 week later, I was in the gallery, and I was looking at the very bleak condition of the gallery, which meant that we had steam radiators in the room with pipes that ran up the walls. We had probably 5 or 6 through-the-wall room air conditioners to cool it. The lighting fixtures that hung down throughout the room were antiquated, so that meant the lighting for artwork was definitely lacking. And so I went back into Richard Pionk and to Pam Singleton and said, listen, I'd like to designate that we begin a gallery renovation, that we use the funds that are raised from American Masters to propose and to designate these monies for that express purpose. And so that when I can tell people that walk into that first show that would say, oh my gosh, this is, yeesh, look at this raggy old building. We could announce, say yes, and the monies that we raise from the purchase of the art that we sell will go toward renovating this space. And in 2014, April 1st, we unveiled one of the grandest gallery spaces in New York City.
Yeah, it's a beautiful space. So, Tim, let's move into a different direction because I want to talk a little bit about collecting. But before I do, just give me a sound bite or two on why I should become a member of Salmagundi, whether I'm a collector or whether I'm an artist, especially if I'm an artist who doesn't live in New York City. What the heck benefit is there to me for being a member?
Good question, Eric. Well, I think that the first and foremost is the now that we have refined the application process so that the jurying is pretty tough. If you're going to apply as an artist member, and let me just quickly say we have 2 categories of membership, patron members and artist members. So the patrons are obviously the non-artists. The rates are the same for each person. But if you're applying for Salmagundi membership as an artist, you have to pass some rigorous criteria with your artwork to be juried in. So number one, it is a benefit to you if you are a juried member of Salmagundi to be able to use our name after your name. So you're artist member Joe Smith from Colorado, and you're a proud member of the Salmagundi Club. People that know, and now the Salmagundi name is enjoying this resurgence, people know that that's an accomplishment unto itself. Secondly, it gives artist members the opportunity to submit artwork for many, many shows throughout the year. We have, 10 or so shows specifically for Salmagundi artist members, and you can't quote me on that number, but it's a multiple opportunities for you as an artist to submit work into the show. And again, that's a jurying process. So just because you're a member of Salmagundi, that's not going to guarantee that you're going to hang in every show. You'll line up with everyone else as our membership attains a higher level of expertise through the addition of better and better members. So it becomes harder to exhibit. And that's a double-edged sword because that's maybe frustrating that you don't get to hang in every show, but then you know that when you're in that show, you're in the best of company. So that's the two things that I would say are of the greatest advantage for an out-of-stater to be a member of the club.
And if you
and there are others, and then
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, what I'm a member, and what I like to do is it gives me a home when I'm in New York City. I have a place I can go make a phone call or sit and go to the library, do some research. I can go to dinner there. It's a wonderful place to take clients and friends. So there's a lot of other benefits.
Absolutely, yeah. Whether you're an artist member or a patron member, the building is yours. If you're a member, you're one of the owners of this great building that we've got here. It's a brownstone mansion that was built as a private home in 1853, and it looks very much the way that it did in 1853. And every improvement and renovation and restoration that we do, I've made it clear that it must be completely true to the spirit of the original architecture. So we're not going to modernize this and make it, different. We're going to modernize it internally, hidden things such as plumbing and electrical and lighting and heating. So you then, as you say, another benefit for all members is that it's your home away from home.
By the way, the artwork in the building is just to die for. It's just fabulous. Not just the shows, obviously, but the permanent
collection. You're so right. Thank you for that. Yeah, it is. We've just got terrific artwork that we've acquired over the time. So we're about 147 years old. The club started in 1871, and we've got a beautiful collection that is always hanging. Part of it, we rotate paintings in and out in sculpture, but it is spectacular. And so again, if you're a member, this is your place. You can come in here at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you can spend the entire day till 10 o'clock at night, and you can drink at the bar. You can play pool on our 10-foot pool tables. This is your home in New York City. That was one of the great appeals for me when I first walked in. I said, holy cow, I was living on Long Island, and I said, wow, I can come to New York City and come and just plop down in the library with my laptop and spend the day? Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a wonderful experience. And the library, by the way, is one of the most magnificent places, just to know the people that have been in that room and to see the historical books that have been out of print for 100 years that are in there that are just phenomenal. Great way to do research. Tim, I want to move into a different direction before we wrap up. I want to talk about collecting. I'd like you to give, if possible, the mindset of a collector to the painter. What is it that you now? And I would make the distinction that you are a true collector. I've seen part of your collection. I've seen your collection at your one home, not the other. And I know that you have I know the artist in your collection. I know you have a fabulous collection. But
thank you.
I think there's a distinction. There are people who buy art, and then there are people who are collectors. You are very deliberate about how you buy art, what you collect. And I think it would be helpful for artists to understand the mindset of a collector. What is it that got you into painting? What is it? I mean, not painting, but collecting. What is it that you really look for? What are the things that artists maybe should be doing that would help them in their path, whether it's selling art or whether it's painting?
Okay, well, that's a very important question and not an easy one. As I got into collecting, I didn't know what I was necessarily looking for or doing. It was kind of an accidental life story that began in the early 90s, 1991 actually, and I think that one of the real advantages that I had in beginning as a collector was to go to well-curated shows, and that influenced me greatly. So the first art show that I went to was Western Visions. It was held at the National Museum of Wildlife Art, and that part of my story is the most important and influential part of it, and it was a miniature show originally, and I first was aware of it in 1995 and started attending that show every year. And the pieces in the show were no bigger than 10 by 12. But I didn't know it because I was a newbie at the time, but show was so well curated by the folks in charge of the Wildlife Museum. Bill Kerr, one of the great minds in American art collecting, was the founder of the museum, and through his leadership, they brought in the very best people that they had within their kind of realm of representational art. And so it was Bill H. F., it was Tucker Smith, it was Matt Smith, it was Clyde Aspavig, and Christopher Blossom, and David Thimgen, and Kurt Walters, and on and on. What that means is that I walked in there and was aware of that art, not knowing that I was looking at some of the very best artists in the country. I just knew it was really well done, but it colored my world, and it influenced me in a wonderful way. It also ruined and spoiled me because then I expected to see all art look that good. So I was fortunate in that first encounter with the Wildlife Museum, and the show was not a wildlife show. Let me make that clear. It was all manner of landscape, and the fact that they included Chris Blossom in there, the maritime art. So, but I think that to take this now to your question, one of the real things that I look for, maybe the most significant thing, other than the high level of skill and quality and execution, is that I want art to have an idea. I want it to tell a story. I need to see, when I engage, I walk into a room of 100 pieces of art, if I'm judging a show or just at an event, within just a few minutes, as I read the room, you can recognize those paintings that tell a story, and have something that then I may not see it as how the artist intended the story, and usually the artist is really fine with that, to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to leave this loose enough so you can give it your own narrative. But I think that that's such an important aspect for an artist. I have a lot of landscape art. I like landscape art. It's harder to do in a landscape, but it's certainly very possible. But I want to see something within that's a hook, that it tells me a narrative about that piece.
Excellent. And how do you develop taste as a collector?
Exposure, exposure, exposure. Read. I frequently ask. I did a talk last weekend in Atlanta. I was one of the judges of Olmsted PleinAir, and I did a talk on collecting to a great group of folks. And I said, so, how many of you subscribe to what magazines? You need to be reading, 5 or 6 art magazines every month.
Tim, let me just stop you there. There aren't 5 or 6 good ones.
Oh, there are only 2?
That's right. Well, 3 now.
I forgot who I was talking to. I'm sorry. So it's, I knew nothing about art. I was raised in a home of very modest means. I've never been a guy that's had a lot of money. I didn't have any art education, but like many artists and many fine artists are self-taught. So I likewise am self-taught. And so I just read, and I went to museums, and I went to events, and that's how I trained my eye and my mind. And I always want to give credit to my mom, because she had a great eye, and she always, even though we were not people of money, she kept a lovely home, and in her later years became a painter. I have to say, Eric, I was in Santa Fe, and came to much of the PleinAir conference, and a lot of gals that would have been my mom's age when she retired and did wonderful work, they were there, and it was a lot of fun. It made me think of her and the joy that art gave to her. So I credit much of my maybe innate understanding of art to my mom's great eye. So there may be some genetic aspect to it, but uh, like many of my artist friends that started out without any great deal of skill, they are able through observation and continual work and practice, if you will, to achieve great things.
Tim, one of the things I'm curious about, I know that the names, the influence of the artist is a big part of your collecting philosophy. Not entirely. I know that you will buy paintings from people who are not necessarily well known. As a matter of fact, you showed me one that you recently purchased. But you know that brand is also important. What are the things that you want to see artists out there doing?
Well, you know, I want to see them be unafraid. I do not want to see repetition of the same old everything. There are artists that, you know, I love and are dear to me, and I see a repetition pattern in what they do that is stifling to them. They may or may not realize that. But I frequently will use Kwang Ho as an illustration in this, and a few years ago I did a talk at the Denver Art Museum, and it was a combination of artists and collectors in the auditorium, and Kwang was standing off on the side, and this question was asked in some fashion by the moderator, and I said, you know, I would encourage artists to use Kwang Ho as an example, an illustration, because he's unafraid to try anything. And I think that goes to the underlying preparation that an artist does in their life and their career, because, you know, like a great musician that studies the classics, or a dancer that studies all of the great moves of the ballet masters, and then launches out into unknown territory because they've got those basics. I mean, I'm not a great fan of Picasso, but in his early years, what he did was beautiful and astonishing, and then he was free to take that on to where he went. In the instance of Kwang Ho, you never know what you're going to see from him next, but it's always rooted in quality. And so I think that artists who are well established, well practiced, and successful need to liberate themselves onto the next level. I'm not saying that's easy, and since I'm not an artist, I can't claim that is going to be successful, but that, you know, I think of C.W. Mundy, same thing. C.W. is, you know, so skilled, and now you just never know what he's going to do next, and the stuff that is created out of that is just grand.
Okay, so last question, what advice do you have for the artists who are listening, who are maybe trying to become one of the greats, from the perspective of you as a judge, you as a head of the Salmagundi Club, and you as a collector? What can you leave them with?
Well, I really would hope that each artist would bring their own unique voice to the table. One of the negative aspects of the question is that I will bring up here is to say, when you study with a certain master that has a certain style, be very careful of the danger of emulating that style. So you then look like, you know, that artist in the junior version. You, in the end, certainly do want to take advantage to study with all of the many greats that, you know, we would talk about, you know, Scott Christensen, Don Demers, you know, whoever it may be that you can avail yourself of, but be unafraid and, you know, have those solid basics, and then reach out to be who you are as an artist, not to be who they are, because you'll never be them. You'll just be an inferior copy, perhaps. So be bold, be true to your own inner spirit, and have your own ideas and tell your own stories.
Great. Well, Tim, thank you so much for being on the Plein Air podcast today. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Well, thanks again to Tim Newton of the Salmagundi Club. Tim has done more for the art world than just about anybody I know.
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhodes, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
In the Marketing Minute, I try to answer your marketing questions, which you can email me, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Here we have one question from Carol Iglesias of Locust Grove, Virginia. Her question: is it bad business to price my paintings differently for different geographical markets? Well, good question, Carol. There's no doubt that prices vary from city to city, but it depends on how you are selling your art. For instance, if you are doing local sales only and you're doing a tent show maybe you're doing tent show in 3 different cities, you might be able to get more in one city than another one. For instance, you're probably going to get more for a painting in Silicon Valley or Honolulu than you would in maybe Flint, Michigan or Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's perfectly acceptable to do that if you're doing tent shows because nobody has any way to compare your pricing. Pricing is, after all, about supply and demand. But if you're selling nationally or if you're on gallery websites and you're on your own website with pricing, then you don't want people looking up your art on your website and seeing that the price is lower or higher than what they're about to pay. Believe me, they will do it. They'll walk into a gallery, they'll Google your name, they'll find you, and they're going to look at your prices elsewhere. So you need consistency across all your markets and your galleries. If you're an established artist with a real brand and market recognition, then you're going to hurt yourself by changing your pricing based on geography. And what tends to happen is that change is lowering the price for one individual. But the problem is that once you've lowered the price, it's hard to get it up, and you hurt your long-term collectability and maybe your ability to get into a gallery. Now, galleries do deals all the time, but they do them privately, and it's usually a little bit off here and there, and they know a range that they can take off. But remember, people always will remember the lowest price that they paid. So I'm a member of this organization. They just raised their prices, and I don't want to pay the new price. I want to pay the old price. I remember it. So I basically sent them a note and said, this is what I'm willing to pay. And they took it. So remember, you don't want to get locked in at a lower price. Now, you do want to ratchet up your prices year after year if you possibly can, because that's how you get to higher prices. And as your supply decreases, demand increases, that's when you can start getting more money. We know a lot of artists who are getting a lot of money for their paintings, $200,000-$300,000 in some cases, because they're only painting 3 or 4 a year and they're highly popular and they're very collectible. That's kind of where you ultimately want to be. But they took some time to get there, and they had to raise their prices a little bit at a time. But there are moments when perhaps you get a lot of publicity, you become nationally known, you get major awards and major shows. Maybe those are the times to think about raising your prices. Also, if you're already working with gallery, you want to have pricing discussions with them. The discussion has to be, how much are you going to lower your prices? What are you going to advertise the prices to be? Because you want them to be consistent with your other galleries. And by the way, you can't set prices. The galleries can't talk to each other and set prices. That's not legal, but you can set your own prices. And people know the market, and they know you as an artist, and they're going to look you up. So make sure that the gallery is part of your conversation, because they may think your prices are too low and it's time to ratchet them up. And if you do that, you need to make sure that you're doing that consistently. You might have to lose a gallery, because if they don't think they can sell at the higher price, when it's time for you to get your prices up, they may choose not to be part of that. So anyway, that's a little bit on pricing. Well, the interview was underwritten by Streamline Premium Art Video. If you want to check out some of the top painters in the world and study under them in your own home on video, check out streamlineartvideo.com. Also, the interview was sponsored by the second annual Figurative Art Convention and Expo, FACE, coming up in November. It's for museum-quality artists and those who want to be. Lots of demos, workshops, and ways to make you a better painter. Just check out the lineup. I mean, to get this group of people together like this in this environment, it's amazing. Check it out at figurativeartconvention.com. We hope you'll join us in Miami in November. Also, if you've not seen my blog where I talk about life and art and just stuff, it's called Sunday Coffee, and you can subscribe to it by going to coffeewitheric.com. Well, this is always fun. Let's do it again sometime, like next week.
This
We'll
has
see you
been
then.
the
My name is
Marketing
Eric
Minute
Rhodes,
with Eric
publisher
Rhodes. You
and
can
founder
learn
of
more
PleinAir
at
magazine. Remember, it's a big world
artmarketing.com.
out there. Go paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.